Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the Blessed Noble and Perfectly Enlightened One.
Homage to the Blessed Noble and Perfectly Enlightened One.
Namo Sadanto Suchedoye Olahadi Samya Samputoshe.
Namo Sadanto Suchedoye Alahadi Samya Samputoshe.
无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a million eons. But now we see it, hear it, and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Good job. Okay, page 51 in your songbook. We finished last night with a variety of roads and paths, and today our Bodhisattva is on those roads and encountering things along the way. So I thought, gee whiz, there's the outside road, and there's the Eightfold Path, which is inside. Wasn't that clever? And we have this Eightfold Path song. Love those analogies. So this is the Eightfold Path is one of those Buddhist lists that everybody goes, you know, right, you know, there's all of them, you know, all the right, you know, it's like views and the rest, you know. We remember one of them, and maybe I'm the only one who does that, but that's what I do. I try to fake it because it's hard to remember all 8, you know. All of them, you know the one, Eightfold Path. Oh, there are 8 of them, you know. You know, what are they? Well, you know, I don't remember. So there's 8 of them. And when you get to the 12, it's even harder, the 12 links. But the song helps. The song helps you remember. So when somebody challenges you, Dharma speakers, you know, what are the Eightfold Path Dharma speakers? You can go, oh, I know what they are. First, we learn wise understanding. Eightfold Path. So here they are. Here's all 8. You got your song there, page 51. These are the Eightfold Path in musical form. And the good part about this song is that the last verse has all 8. So if you can remember just the last verse, you get extra credit. You got one verse, all 8 paths. Okay, now your part is Eightfold Path. That's your part. Can you remember that much? Says my sainted Irish uncle. Can you remember that much? If not, have another drink. Eightfold Path. We can do that, right? Here we go. Eightfold Path. There we go. And you'll see when to come in. First we learn wise understanding. Eightfold Path. Next we learn wise aspiration. Eightfold Path. Understanding leads to practice. Aspiration guides our wisdom. Walk it to the end of suffering. Eightfold Path. How are we doing? So far so good? Okay, so there's understanding and aspiration. That's Zhengjie, Zhengzhi, right? Here we go. Wisdom speech is true and gentle. Eightfold Path. Wisdom's actions follows precepts. Eightfold Path. Now what about speech and action? Speech gives courage to the fearful. Action shows the power of virtue. Walk the elder's way of wisdom. Eightfold path. Okay, so we have understanding, aspiration, speech, and action. 正言正行, right? Now, what do we have next? Wisdom's livelihood is harmless. Ahimsa. Eightfold path. Vigor. Wisdom's vigor serves the helpless. Eightfold path. Livelihood respects all beings. Vigor can protect the planet. Walk the way of great compassion. Eightfold path. Okay, we're getting there. We only got 2 more to go. 6 out of 8 so far. Here we go. What is next? Mindfulness and concentration. Wisdom's mindfulness remembers. Eightfold path. Focus with wise concentration. Eightfold path. Mindfulness brings satisfaction. Concentration leads to wisdom. Walk the way of peace and happiness. Eightfold path. Okay, here's all 8 in 1. Ready? This is the extra. This is the one to learn. What do we got? Understanding, aspiration, Eightfold Path. Wisdom's speech, wisdom's action, Eightfold Path. Wisdom's work and wisdom's vigor. Mindfulness and concentration. Walk the road to liberation, Eightfold Path. Here we go. Understand. You all know it now. Let's sing it together. Understanding, aspiration, Eightfold Path. Wisdom's speech and wisdom's action, Eightfold Path. Wisdom's work and wisdom's vigor. Mindfulness and concentration. Walk the road to liberation. Eightfold path. Give yourself a twinkle. All right, there we go. Eight of them. In our text, we want to turn to page 16, down second from the bottom, where it says, "When I see a multitude assembled." Somebody asked me yesterday, is it okay to write in a sutra? Will you fall directly into the hells if you write in a sutra? And I'm sure by asking that, somebody got scolded out there in the assembly for writing in a sutra. And I want to show you where I have written in my sutra. Right? I've written reminders and notes and things. And the point is, I intend to keep this sutra, and I did it neatly. It's not careless. It's not a mess. It's designed to help me learn the text. And there's a way of approaching texts that sees them as things that can hurt you. There's lots of danger involved in touching Buddhist texts, you know. You explain one word wrong, you'll fall into the hells. You know that, right? Just ask an old woman, she'll tell you, you know, an old lay woman who's the biggest one, you know, she'll tell you, because she has all these things that are called 莫名其妙的规矩. You know, and it's like, people who live quiet lives, you know, like to get excitement from being powerful. So if you don't have any place to be powerful, maybe the second daughter, the third daughter, you make up ways to make other people feel powerless. So we had a woman at Berkeley who was expert in Moming Chi Miao De Guiju, wonderful rules. And she would go around threatening everybody with danger and harm from offending her rules. You all know, don't you, that if you light a stick of incense and the ash falls outside the censer, you're going to be separated from your family? You know that, right? You know that, yeah, well, you heard it here, boy, be careful. You know that if you light incense or a candle from an existing flame on the Buddha's altar, you're stealing the Buddha's light. To for the guang! And you, oh no, I'm stealing the... And it's like, wait. Number one, does the Buddha have light? And isn't he limitless light? And isn't he like kind of compassionate, happy to, it's like, wait a minute, lady. You're just full of affliction and fear yourself, and you're projecting it out in the world. So, if somebody told you that you're in big, big trouble because you wrote in a sutra, you could say, well, let's see, have you memorized any of the text? I'm doing this so I can actually help learn what's in the text. I think maybe, some careful annotating. In mine, I write, carefully. I write carefully on my text so that when I look at it, I go, right, that's right. I think it's okay. Now, if you don't want to write in your sutra, fine. Right? Don't write, Jin Chuan Shi, could you meet me behind the half can after lunch? That's probably not not a good one. These are notes for myself to help me learn the text. That's the point. So don't go around scaring people that they're going to fall in the hells because they're writing in it. All right? Now, if you don't like to write in text, fine. But don't, throw it another. All right, so.
Only if it's your own copy.
It's my own copy. I'm going to keep this.
One we are
I have my name on it, so my notes don't wind up in a stack, and everybody goes, wait, what's this mess, So just keep it. So under those conditions, it's probably okay. The Berkeley Buddhist Monastery inherited a large portion of Professor Houston Smith's books on religion. And they're covered with notes. The pages are covered with notes. As he was reading it, he would go, Eureka! Punk! And it's like, aha! And 6 months later, when he's going back, he's going to look for the aha. Because that was the point, And Professor Houston Smith wrote books that are arguably the best writing in English to introduce people to religion, not just Asian religion, but the religions of Native America, the religions of India, and Christianity and Islam. And it came from his reading and going, aha, So it's okay. It's all right. If you don't have to write, don't carelessly write, but if you want to write in your text, you're not going to fall into the hells. Okay. So, when I see a multitude assemble, let's start there. We'll do them one at a time. Here we go. Ready? When I see a multitude assembled, I think, may all living beings proclaim the profound Dharma and be in harmony with all beings. Okay. Here's our practitioner walking down the road with his or her alms bowl. If it's her, it's 2 or 3 together. The monk can go by himself, but it's better if you're with a group. And he's walking down and he's maybe seeing early morning work meeting for the rice planting team. Maybe he's seeing the dairy collective, about to set out to, we're on page 16 down at the bottom, out to receive the milk from the farmers if they're collecting dairy, or what other reasons would people? It's the anti-Trump rally outside City Hall. That's what it is. That's what he's seeing. Multitude assembled. May all beings proclaim the profound Dharma and be in harmony. So he sees the assembly and he's thinking harmony. That's the response. So the sutra takes us into the heart of the bodhisattva, the practitioner, his reaction to the experience outside. Okay, that's the thought guiding this chapter. Okay, comments, questions? Let's go on. Ready? When I see a huge pillar, I think, may all living beings abandon egoism and contention and be free from rage and hatred. Anybody see Ashoka's pillars? Indian traveler over there, right? King Ashoka, one of the great figures in Indian religious history, went from a murdering monarch who was a bloodthirsty battle victor who cut off the heads of all his enemies and had torture chambers, was converted by his sister, who was a Buddhist nun, and became one of the greatest symbols of peace and benevolent rule in the world. He became totally transformed by his encounter with the Buddha's peaceful heart. And he made all of India a game preserve, right? And pardoned criminals and banned excessive military expeditions. And he also sent out all over the known world at the time these pillars. They're huge, tall things. There's one at Huafan Dashi, a replica. And there's some around various places around the world. I think the Metropolitan Museum has one. I think the Musée Guimet in Paris has one. And they're inscribed on the pillars are these words of wisdom, words to rule the country, words to live by. And there's one, if anybody is ever in an interfaith situation and you're asked to speak, it's really good to have in your notebook King Ashoka's inscriptions on interfaith harmony. Just search it on Google. It's King Ashoka on interfaith, and it's one of the inscriptions. And I can't do it from memory, but it's impress your teachers at DRBU next semester, have it ready, just drop it into an essay or something. And it's like, it goes, anyone who attacks another religion automatically shows that they are not true believers in their own religion. If you are a true believer in your own religion, you will not attack any other religion, simply because no founder of a religion establishes his religion over any other religion, any religion worth following. And it goes on like that, you know, and it's just like when you read that in an interfaith context, people go, oh, that's wonderful, who's that? You say, oh, the Buddhist king. Oh, there was a Buddhist king? You know, can I get a, and they meet you afterwards and say, could you give me a copy of that? That was really good. You know, I want that for my next meeting. So King Ashoka put these pillars over India. When I see one of those, I think, may all beings abandon egoism and contention and be free from rage and hatred like King Ashoka. You know, so, Connie.
Okay, so you know how like I'm a Leo? One of the Leo's trait is egotism. And I'm not saying like I'm like the most egotistical person in the world, but it's like, I don't know, I want to practice humility, but I don't know how to go about doing that other than bowing. Like day to day, like walking and standing and sitting, like how can I practice humility?
Okay, question, open question. How can we practice humility? Group wisdom? In terms of humility, I think the Dharma that works really well is Sui Shi Gong De. It's Samantabhadra's fifth vow, and it's rejoice in others' merit. That requires you to notice other people. A yin Leo doesn't notice anybody, but it all comes back. But somebody who's cultivating, if you sit still, you know that your skin is just a form. We heard Dharmista Lai talk about forms. Our bigger body extends throughout all sentient creatures, all breathing the same air together. So the Leo goes, oh, you know, This person's really, really musically talented. This person is just so much in tune with their body. This person can cook like crazy, just everybody loves. And everyone has talent, and I rejoice in their talents. You don't have to diminish yourself, but you also, it's a lonely world where you alone are the best, right? If you don't want to be lonely, let everybody be best, without contention. And so, your question was, how do you reduce ego? How do you learn humility? And it's by noticing others' bright lights, noticing others' qualities. Dharma Master Lai yesterday said, everybody's a Buddha inside. This Buddha light is shining, covered over more or less till we're Buddhas. But if you can look at people and see their Buddha light, there's no sense of you having to be humble. Everybody has this wisdom. That's the way to see it. It's just notice others, rejoice in others' merits. So up on the top here, when I see a forest, ready? Together, here we go, ready? When I see a forest, I think, may all living beings become worthy of the respect and veneration of gods and humans. Okay. Worthy of respect by gods and humans. That's one of the titles of the Buddha. And what do? Look, there we go. We don't have to imagine a forest, just notice. Right, there it is. We're in a forest. And when those drone videos are on the screen, you just see how, you go 7 miles down to we're on our road here is the North Fork of the Smith River Road. And what's the road going out to 101? Anybody notice? Reedsport.
Smith River Road.
East
Smith River Road.
Smith River Road. Okay, this is the North Fork Road. So that's the Smith River Road. So 7 miles to the Smith River Road, 12 miles out. So we're 20 miles in. And is it 12 or 15 miles to our fork here? Anyway, so we're roughly 20 miles into the woods. All those wonderful trees growing in harmony. And when I see a forest, I think, may all beings be worthy of respect and veneration of gods and humans. Which tree in the forest says, I'm lesser than the tree beside me? Not. I was in Uluru, called the Red Heart of Australia. It used to be known as Ayers Rock. The indigenous folks called it Uluru. And we were driving around, and a local guy, his name was Reggie, was our guide. And this guy was an amazing man. He was about maybe a 24-year-old Aussie bloke, and he had he raised in Melbourne, but he left his suburban upbringing and went to live with the indigenous, because he said, there is wisdom in this land, and it's not with the white people. I want to go learn from my indigenous teachers. So he went out to Uluru, and sure enough, he had been trained in environmental engineering and in, natural systems. So he married his scientific knowledge of larger context with indigenous wisdom. And so he was able to tell the stories. He said, now, you look outside here, he says, you see these trees here, these are called Aussie pines. And then he went on and said, notice you'll see like 5, and he said they grow within about a 3-kilometer radius, and if you're in an airplane up high enough, you can see that they stretch all the way across Australia, but only within this radius. And they follow a meridian, it's like, oh, I never noticed that. Sure enough, there they go. And the land is so flat and red because of iron content, and it goes forever into the horizon, this line, 3 kilometers of trees. And he said they decide among every 10 trees or so which one will be the survivor, and then the others all disappear into the soil and give their energy to that one. Wow. Because there's not enough to nurture in that flat, dry land. There's not enough water. So they give it all to one, but the roots stay connected. The other ones disappear in the soil. So he said, you know, this under the soil, you can't see it. This is all a community. And they're all in touch, you know. And, oh, I didn't know that. So you think, good grief, they yield to one tree that they pick out as the one that they'll support so it can grow. And it, in turn, does the photosynthesis and keeps the roots alive until the time comes for another one to come up. And then the other, you know. I think, my goodness, leadership, you know, how about that? So when I see a forest, I think, may all beings be worthy of the respect and veneration of gods and humans. What we don't know, you know, what we don't know is just amazing. And the thing that's scary, and we haven't talked about that, this trip, this camp, but what's scary is instead of humanity saying, you know, we really don't know much about the world around us, let's look and find out about our living systems. Instead, we recreate it in silicon. We turn our back on the systems around us and don't investigate ourselves in the world. We create a social network on chips made of silicon, you know. Instead of hydrocarbon-based investigation, we go out into a world of machines. And cancers and strange diseases result. We force the growing of crops using chemicals from Monsanto and allergen and others, you know, and then all the children get strange food allergies and broken stomachs, and we think, why? What's that? You know. Then you go and try to buy a non-GMO seed, and you discover you can't, because they're mostly all owned by Monsanto. And you go, gee whiz, we are in trouble, you know. And here those indigenous, they know how to collect water, you know. They know when it's going to rain and how to collect the water, and then how to keep it and how to use it. And so it just all they learn by watching. They watch and they say, this is what happens, and they listen to how it's been happening. Their generations back tell them, and they go, oh, okay, I see that, okay, you know, maybe we can make that work. Sure enough, nobody gets sick, and it all works, and they know the names of the creatures, and they know their stories, and they share those stories, and it works. We are different people, and we recreate our senses in machines. So it's no guarantee that we're going to make it. So anyway, there's wisdom here. If probably one of the best things that could happen to Western civilization would be a large power outage. If we had a large power outage, imagine we'd lose our bank records. Right? All our money's in digits anyway, zeros and ones. Suddenly nobody would know how much they were worth, and plastic money would be useless, right? And what else? Well, health records, you know, wouldn't work, and insurance records wouldn't work, and we would probably, the number one skill, people are saying this, the number one skill for the 21st century is the ability to bring food out of the ground. Subsistence farming. For example, not to scare anybody, we're talking about roads here, I'm still relevant, still connected to our text. Right? So, most grocery stores in downtown Berkeley, where we live, we're in downtown Fremont, downtown South San Francisco, and Santa Rosa, you know, and around San Jose, most of those stores have something called time to market, and they don't stock food. The food comes on trucks, right? And anything that's like 24, 48 hours old is hard to sell. So they depend upon the trucks getting there with the fresh stuff. And freeways are very fragile systems. Freeways as an ecosystem are very fragile. One big rig jackknifes at the on-ramp, you've shut that access to the freeway. Nothing moves on that freeway, right? freeway turns into a shuffleboard court or a tennis court or the parking lot, right? And so what about the stores? The stores are empty. And then there's a run on stores. Happens in Taiwan every time there's a typhoon threatened that never actually lands, right? The stores are empty of stuff. So where's the food going to come from? Well, how much did you stash? How much can you barter with your neighbors? Maybe you got bees and they have coffee, so you trade the honey for the coffee. You know, but where is the food going to come from? Because we're dependent on the trucks. The trucks depend on the freeways. The freeways depend upon maintenance, right? So, okay, gee whiz. It doesn't take much to, my point is, what we built is very fragile. And it depends on a lot of conditions being there. All of our money depends upon electricity and the wires that power the computers that tell us how much we're worth. Because we don't keep, you know, gold. What, gold? You know, we depend on credit. So understand how fragile we built it. And if Buddhists could, I think simplify is a good start. Be content with beans and rice. Learn about that. We're already there, pretty close. And then think about, where does those beans and rice come from? Could I grow food? If there was no food in the Safeway and no food on my shelf, could I grow? I don't have the knowledge. I haven't been rural for, my dad was a lawyer, you know. His parents were farmers. So we're a couple generations out of knowing how to survive, you know. So it's really good. Bees and honey are good. Growing tea, knowing how to serve tea is good. What else? What are some of the other? Chinese medicine is a good one. Laundry skills, sewing, making clothes. Oh my goodness. We're not far from that, right? America is a brand new country. We haven't made it to 300 years. And it was just 2 generations back when those skills were close. You needed them. My grandmother made all her clothes, you know. So my mother's mantra during the Depression, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Because why? There isn't another one.
Sounds like a Buddhist comment.
Amen. I got a song. So use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without, because you won't find another one. So my mom was youngest of 4 sisters. She never had her own clothes until she was 16. She always had hand-me-downs. What do they call it? Not converted. You know what?
Reuse?
No, she.
No, like.
What was it called? There was a verb. What you do? You do something to address.
You alter it.
Alter it. Alter it. We'll alter it. You know, till it fit her. So, not to make people. You know, I want people. I want to think about these things, because once the earthquake comes, and I mean, just think East Bay, right? If you want to go east, you got the Caldecott Tunnel. Is that going to last? Blocked. Okay, can't go east anymore. What do you got across west? Well, we got the Bay Bridge. Can't go west anymore. Okay, well, we want to go north. Well, we got Highway 80. That's going to block first. It's going to be panic going north. Can you walk anywhere? You got the Richmond Bridge. You can't go north, can't go to Marin. Well, you can go around through Vallejo, but boy, everybody wants to go that way. Let's go south. 980, go past the Coliseum. Where are we going to go? The best thing to do, get on a boat. Get on a boat at the marina. Try to go through the Golden Gate. Can you sail? How's your water skills? You know, Dharma to lie. We gotta. So the point is, we're, you know, think. What do we take it all for granted? It's always been that way. It's always going to be that way, right? We better get to know your neighbors. Get to know your neighbors. Make a community where you are. Find out who's good at farming, how quickly you can pull this cement up and find the dirt below it. East Bay is fertile ground. Strawberry Creek has been dammed over in all these places. Undammed Strawberry Creek and Blueberry Creek and Raspberry Creek that all come down. And, you know, get to know. UC Berkeley campus, a lot of farmland. there. You know, the chancellor's residence is surrounded by green lawn. Pull that up and grow stuff, you know. So, boy, oh boy. No joke. I mean, you know, we're the Hayward Fault is the active one where we are, and we're every 140 years it shakes 7.0 or something, and we're now 150 years. We're 8 to 10 years in the red. Shifu said that in time, I mean, he said it's not that the earth can't quake, it's that I won't let it quake, said Shifu. What a bold statement, right? And guess what? No earthquakes. So, how does that work? You know. Anyway, Shifu said, in a time of disaster, the very best thing is to be able to recite the Great Compassion Mantra, he said. And it's too late to get your book out. Let me see, the earth is quaking. Oh, Namo Hala Dano. It's not the same. So he said, people who can recite the Great Compassion Mantra in times like that are very helpful to others. Because you keep your head and you somehow, there's a way, you know, there's a way to help. So the Berkeley Monastery has been participating in our Berkeley Emergency Preparedness Network, and you know, Berkeley being Berkeley, people are noticing, people are paying attention, and so we've been meeting, and actually this has been going on for 20 years, and we created a stash, it's called a cache, of fire axes, radios, batteries, fire hoses, buckets, medicine kits, and they're big industrial strength, high strength red metal caches over your head. You know, they're currently in the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery parking lot for the neighborhood. They didn't start there, but we got them by default, and yet that was 10 years ago. And I was on the communications team working with radios, and since then it's kind of fell apart. The two organizers moved, and people kind of, oh yeah, we're ready, kind of, you know, we're not. And so the best wisdom out of groups like this is know your neighbors, because it's every part of this depends upon working with people. Fire. First thing they say, we're a little bit off our track here. We're a little bit off our learn your gas shutoff. If I could say, give some practical advice to everybody, go home and learn where your gas shutoff is. Find out. And usually there's a wrench beside it, but learn how to turn it off, because when the earth goes boom, you know, gas lines fracture. And if there's a spark, fire. And the biggest damage in the San Francisco earthquake was not the shaking, it was the burning. Mm-hmm. So learn your gas shutoff, learn where the water is, and then look for your neighbors, because they won't know where their gas shutoff is and where they're, you know. There's a team for pets, right? There's a team for safety, there's a medical team, and communications, and all those different skills necessary for the emergency, but that's just the emergency. Next is the day after. How do you get along? What do you eat? What do you drink? What do you do if somebody's got a broken leg? You know. So important stuff, and you can't do it yourself. You need to know your neighbors. Then day number 3, you start trading stuff. We're out of water. Oh, we got extra water. What have you got? Oh, we got some tobacco and coffee. Oh, no luck. You know. Sorry. What have you got? You know, we got extra pillows. Oh, we got pillows. We got blanket. Oh, I'll trade you a blanket for some honey. You know. So, anyway, these are thoughts about ways to use wisdom in the world as we find it. And here's our Bodhisattva walking with his bowl through the community and looking around and noticing, how are we doing? Look ahead, you know. Look behind for wisdom, look ahead for how to apply it. So let's look at number 2. Here we go, ready? When I see high mountains, I think, May all living beings have transcendent good roots like a summit no one can surpass. So, tall mountains, I know the word to translate, it's not I think, Jinro, sure, it's I reflect. I reflect. He reflects inwardly, right? When I see high mountains, I reflect. May all beings, analogy to high mountains, what? Have really, really good roots, really lofty, wholesome qualities, like a mountain pass that is too high to cross over. So he takes the visual object and relates it to an inner experience. That's the action of this text. So outer stimulus, inner reflection. Okay, so we're going to do a global response. YC, we'll switch that to I reflect, I think. Because it is Hui Guang, you know, you reflect within.
Yeah, I reflect.
Okay, next, here we go. When I see a thorny bush, I think, may all living beings quickly cut away and eradicate the thorns of the three poisons. Okay. Do we have thorny bushes at Buddha Root Farm? Yeah, we do. Boy, oh boy, lots and lots and lots. We're a little early for berries. Joanne, when's big berry season?
I think it's later in the summer. It has to really get warm.
Yeah. So we're looking at the just on all sides here. I mean, there they are, there they are, there they are, there they are. We have these green berries. People who don't recognize them come back in about 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and those are purple, ripe, luscious berries. And they're just not ready yet. This is a little early. When we did Buddha Root Farm, the dates was up for debate because we wanted to avoid the rain. The rain just stopped. But from now until like September, it's pretty dry. These are the 3 months of the year that it's pretty dry. And the berries, the thorny bushes and the berries, come out with the sun. So the rain has to stop, the sun has to shine, and then these berries are really lush. We've had Buddha Root Farms when there were these big bowls of berries on the counter, you know, and they're really, really something. He makes them analogous to three poisons, thorns of the three poisons. Greed. Anybody know what the three poisons are?
Greed. Ignorance.
What was number 3?
Delusion or ignorance.
Right. Stupidity, delusion, ignorance, right? We've heard there are all of those. Sometimes it's called 邪见, 贪嗔邪见, wrong views, crooked views. So in other words, that third poison is got different names to it. So, 痴 is probably the standard. 贪嗔痴. 痴 means stupidity or just delusion. 无明, sometimes ignorance, lack of light. So stupidity always sounds like you're stupid. It sounds like an insult. And the Buddha's not insulting us. He's saying we really don't understand. And that's a poison, that inability. The clearest explanation that I've heard for that last one is disbelieving in cause and effect. That's ignorance. If you think cause and effect doesn't really apply to you, that's a poison, because it still does. Cause and effect is really true. And if we could live our lives according to that, understanding that you plant the seed, you get the result. I did that. Karma, remember? First day we talked about karma. Karma is neutral. It just means action and its result. So ignorance, stupidity, is thinking that I did it, but nothing happens.
I like confusion, because even ignorance still sometimes has a connotation it's your fault.
I know.
Confusion is a little...
Confusion?
Confusion?
That's pretty good. Confusion? What are the Latin roots of confusion? With, con is with. What is confusion? To be confused. I mean, we know what it means, but where does that one come from? Any Latin scholars here? Where's David Rounds when we need him? So yeah, greed, anger, sometimes hatred, And greed is sometimes, what are alternatives for greed as the first poison? Craving. Craving is interesting. Yeah, craving is this, I got like, right?
Loving?
What was that?
Clinging?
Clinging? Yeah, clinging. But clinging is, you cling after you've seen it and grabbed for it. Clinging would be kind of the second step. But yeah, it's the thing, that's the three, but what about the word poison? Poison will kill you. Poison makes you very, very, very sick. And we have not connected greed with something that makes us sick. The name Ronald Reagan comes to mind. And there was a time after the Great Depression when the banks failed that the United States government, our leaders, in their wisdom, put in controls so that the banks wouldn't fail again. Because there were reasons why the banks failed. And they said, yeah, we're going to regulate the banks. Well, the Reagan administration, for various political reasons, removed those controls. And said, nope. And it's a free market, and the market will settle itself, right itself, Sure enough, Wall Street grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, and the very same mistakes were made. So greed became institutionalized as a good thing. And if you've seen the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, and I wish I could unsee that movie. That's one of that's not a nice movie at all. There's a message in it which is, this is wrong. Humanity has greed, anger, and delusion, right, and confusion. But boy, that's a historical document of what happens when you override your wisdom. We solved a problem, and then greed arose, and they said, nah, it's not important. Greed is good. We can do it better. Anybody else? Yeah, Jason.
Question from an interfaith perspective: is this similar to the original sin, or is that totally?
No, I don't think so. Well, let's see. Probably to do a thorough answer to that would take a lot of time, I think. I don't really understand original sin in all its perverted glory, all its twisted logic. But I think there is a way. I can see a link where it's coming out of human nature was this attraction, and original sin is really complicated. So I think maybe best to stay away from it right now, because it had to do with disobedience. I told you not to eat any fruit. And then the story goes, Eve, right, it was her fault. Right. She tempted Adam, but it was the snake's fault. No, let's see, the snake and the apple and Eve and the garden, and it's a story, and it's been the basis of a lot of theology. So, anybody else want to take a stab? Is this Doug? Let it go. That one flew right over. Jason, we can talk about that behind the half can after lunch. How's that? So, that's where we do our closet theology, So you think it was really the snake's fault? No. So, okay. More comments about greed and Ronald Reagan? Yes, Zilong.
On the Tanchengzhi, I found it really helpful to look at the Chinese characters. Like the Chu is Bing, with the Zhi, sick knowledge.
Yes.
Or sick
knowledge.
Ill knowing.
Yeah, ill knowing, right?
Tan is Jin, like today at the top, and Bei, money at the bottom. So I want the money today, short-term profit.
Right.
So
beautiful.
But how about Chen?
It's like angry eyes opening wide, and the 木字
边还有对 That's right. Yeah, they're really helpful.
But it's Zen. The name is truth.
He's really angry.
Yeah. True hatred. Right.
Truly angry.
Truly angry. Chen.
That's good.
Yeah, they're good. Okay, next one. Luxuriant foliage. Here we go. When I see the luxuriant foliage of trees, I think, may all living beings get samadhi and liberation and find their shelter there. Okay, we were wandering along a blasted highway, sun blasted, and there's an oasis. We go for it. Usually where there's trees, there's water. So we get samadhi and liberation as the shelter from samsara, in the wilderness of birth and death. One of the best passages in the Avatamsaka Sutra, probably my very favorite. If I had to pick one passage out of the Avatamsaka as my favorite, it's vow number 9 in chapter 40, the King of Trees. The vow is Heng Sure Zhongsheng, according with living beings, and it's the analogy of the great tree, the Bodhi tree, in the midst of the trackless waste of birth and death, which allows living beings to be its roots and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to be its fruits. And when you water the roots of living beings, you get the fruits of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas' wisdom. So you water living beings with great compassion, and the result is Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Bodhi comes from living beings, it says. I remember just reading that and realizing that that's why the Mahayana is a Buddha Dharma, it's a teaching of Dharma that requires relationship. You have to, in order to become a Buddha in this description, you have to be a living being and come from living beings. So it says the tree, the tree in the great forest, in the trackless wilderness, depends upon water on its roots for the fruits and flowers to flourish. Likewise, here's the analogy: the regal Bodhi tree in the wilderness of birth and death depends on living beings for its roots. And if we water the roots that are living beings, think your own bad habits, living beings, with the water of great compassion, the fruits and flowers of the Buddha's and Bodhisattva's wisdom results. It says, therefore, Bodhi depends on living beings. If there were no living beings, no Bodhisattva would ever accomplish Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. When I read that, it was like, oh yeah. Oh. Having the tree there makes it clear. If there were no living beings, no bodhisattvas would ever accomplish Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, the highest wisdom. So, water those living beings. And if it's like, I'm going to get to Bodhi this weekend, get out of my way. You know, it's like, no, you're not. Good luck. You know, you're going to wind up afflicted and probably turn your back on Buddhism because it doesn't work. You know, no, you just didn't do it right. You didn't do it. You did it a different way than the sutras describe. So, okay, let's do some more. We've got 3 in a row here that have to do with flowers and fruits. Here we go. Ready? When I see blooming flowers, I think, may all living beings experience spiritual powers and the like, as abundant as flowers in bloom. When I see a blossoming tree, I think, may all living beings appear with the splendor of flowers, replete with the 32 hallmarks. When I see, typo, get that out of there. When I see fruits and flowers, I think, may all living beings get the supreme Dharma and realize the way of Bodhi. Okay. So the first one is blooming flowers, and I reflect, may all beings experience Doug powers and the like, and Jim, spiritual powers, as abundant as flowers in bloom. When I see a blossoming tree, I think, may all beings appear with the splendor of flowers, splendid flowers, replete with the 32 hallmarks of a Buddha. That's what that means, the Buddha's appearance. When I see, typo, I missed that one, fruits and flowers, I think, may all beings get the Supreme Dharma, obtain the Supreme Dharma, attain the Supreme Dharma, perfect the Supreme Dharma, and realize the way of Bodhi. Okay, those are lovely. It's pointing to the highest stuff. That's pointing to the goal. Okay, what is the goal? Spiritual powers the Bodhisattva uses to teach. The goal, splendid flowers and the 32 hallmarks of the Buddha's adorned body. What's the goal? The goal is supreme Dharma and the way of Bodhi. Okay, so it says, you know, if flowers are the summertime exaltation of a tree or a bush, likewise the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas are the highest state of humanity. That's humanity at its best. So here's our Bodhisattva walking down the road, seeing flowers and going, yeah, that's great. That's great. So again, from self to collective, from me to we, right? From mine to ours, from small to big, from personal to limitless, right? So there's this kind of there's a beating heart happening in every one of these verses. You start with your own personal experience, but you reflect it into the transcendent, into something that goes beyond my mere experience. Okay? Same pattern here, right? Good. Can we turn over page 18? Now we got water. We got a river, a swamp, a pond, a well, a spring, a bridge, and flowing water. The next set. Now, think about the India that this was set in. Pretty clearly it had to have some referent, and that was India at the time. And India is pretty parched right now in many places, with exceptions. The Ganges River Basin, and from Rishikesh all the way down. But there's lots of India that is in the 130s regularly, you know. Gujarat and Maharashtra are pretty hot. And here in this time, there was a lot of water, because this was drawn right from nature. So can we, let's read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 over to flowing water. And just read through and listen for the water imagery and how the Bodhisattva seeing water brings it forth in spiritual terms. Okay? Try it. Here we go. When I see a broad river, I think, may all living beings enter the stream of Dharma that flows to the Buddha's ocean of wisdom. When I see a swamp, I think, may all living beings quickly enlighten to all Buddha's single flavor of Dharma. When I see a pond or a lake, I think, may all living beings be fully accomplished in speech and preach with skill. When I see a well, I think, may all living beings perfect profound eloquence to proclaim all of the Dharma. When I see a bubbling spring, I think, may all living beings increase and grow in skillful means, and may their wholesome qualities be inexhaustible. When I see a bridge crossing, I think, may all living beings carry all across to freedom just the way a bridge does. When I see flowing water, I think, may all living beings aspire to wholesomeness and wash off the filth of delusion. Okay, hold it. There we go. Those are our water analogies, because the Bodhisattva is actually seeing water in the ground and enjoying an earth that has water, and it triggers in him a spiritual reflection. So material experience triggers spiritual reflection, and he or she is using his mind in this wholesome way. I think it goes without saying, but we'll say it anyway, that when your mind is used in this way, you're not complaining. When your mind is this way, you're not fault-finding. When your mind is this way, you're not depressed, right? This is a cure for depression. And it's a training, mind you. These are sweet thoughts, very nice, right? But you actually train your mind this way so that it could go down, but it doesn't. It goes up, you know? What's the difference between this sound and this sound? Just 2 frets, right? So we could look at the world like this, that's unhealthy, you know. You want that to resolve, and you go. Thank you. It's like, now I'm aligned. That's just an adjustment. So the Bodhisattva is not out to find fault, but he has taken his mind into hand and said, I'm going to tune my mind. And these contemplations are a yoga. This is a spiritual mental yoga where you put a form onto what is, and it goes, right? So this is really Gong Fu. This is mental Gong Fu. Instead of letting your mind go into the disharmony where it's out of balance and it won't sustain it because the circulation doesn't work, you bring it back to where it's like, balanced and poised in the center. Okay? So these are, you know, this chapter is meant to be recited. It's meant to be memorized. There are of all the Avatamsaka, there are 3 chapters that people take as to memorize. I've seen them gathered into books in 3 chapters. One is the Jing Heng Pin, this one. One is the Fan Heng Pin, the Brahma Conduct chapter. And the other is the Pu Shen Heng Yan Pin, Samantabhadras, Practices and Vows. Because they're all 3 short. You can memorize them in a week if you work every day, and then you've got them. And you can recite them one after the other in about 30 minutes. If in your mind, you know, if you do it out loud, it takes longer. But those are chapters that people often pick up out of the Avatamsaka to recite. Pure conduct, Brahma conduct, and Samantabhadras, practices and vows. Purifying practices. Brahma conduct, Fan Heng Pin. It follows. This is
16.
This is a 16. This is 11, chapter 11. Anybody know? Fan Heng Pin. It's shorter. It's even shorter than this. We didn't pick it because it doesn't have this format of the day in the life, you know. 16.
Chapter 40?
Samantabhadras, Practices and Vows, chapter 40. Yeah. Right. Okay. Let's do garden, forest, and garden, and then that's where we're going to stop. We're on page 19, 3 to go. Here we go. Ready? When I see a person cultivate. When I see a person cultivate a garden, I think, may all living beings crop out the weeds of craving from the garden of the 5 desires. When I see a tranquil forest, I think, may all living beings leave behind forever all greed and longing and experience no grief and terror. When I see a garden, I think, may all living beings diligently cultivate every practice that approaches the Buddha's Bodhi. Stop.
Nice.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, those are the last 3 of this section. Our cultivator, remember, is walking through his environment, hoping to receive alms at some point so he can eat. And he's reporting, we're looking through his eyes and then seeing his mind, or her mind, as he or she reflects on what she's seeing. And here is a garden. When I see a person cultivate a garden, turning a piece of ground into someplace beautiful and fruitful, may all beings crop out the weeds. Gardeners weed, right? They select among the growing things what they want to keep. When I see a tranquil forest, I think, may all beings leave greed and longing, and because of leaving greed and longing, they don't experience grief and terror. Because they're not anticipating, and then they're not sad when it doesn't come. Okay? They're not longing, and they're not terrified when they lose what they're longing for. When I see a garden, I think, may all beings diligently cultivate every practice that moves towards Bodhi. Buddha's awakening. So this is the external environment. The next part that goes from page 19 all the way over to page 23 is people the Bodhisattva meets. And it's fascinating to see the kind of people that populate the Buddha's world as he describes who the cultivator is going to meet. You know, he meets a person with ornaments, somebody unadorned. They're usually in pairs. A person who clings to pleasure and somebody unattached to pleasure. A happy person and a suffering person. A healthy person, a sick person. Somebody upright and dignified and somebody ugly. Somebody grateful and somebody ungrateful. A shramana, a brahman, an ascetic cultivator, somebody with integrity, a soldier, an unarmed person, people fighting with each other, people with right livelihood, a king, a prince, and an elder and an official. That's the list. And again, it's a day in a life. We're with the person on their shoulder as they go through the day, right? Meeting all these people. So officially, we're going to call a halt to our explanation of the sutra on page 19 and pick it up again next year. Make sure we finish, but we'll spend a bit of time reminding us where we left and what's been going on. And at that point, I think we'll have a better grasp of the text, so maybe we'll have some more devices so that people can see it in a glance, perhaps, what the cultivator is doing, what the point of the sutra is, of this chapter, and maybe we'll have some more devices so we can visualize around the campus, the things that appear in the text. That's going to be a good way to memorize it. Okay, with the time we have, we'll transfer. We'll transfer tonight all at once. With the time we have left, Doug and Angela are going to say a few words about Buddhist education.
As we've been in breaks, people have been telling me how much they're enjoying this practice of studying the text with these wonderful teachers like Reverend Heng Sure and Doug and others, and also the chance to talk about it in group. So one place where you can engage in this kind of practice is at Dharma Realm Buddhist University at the City of 10,000 Buddhas, where we have both a 4-year program for our bachelor students and a 2-year program for our master's students. And I'm going to invite Doug to say a few words about the program, and I can also give details. Would you like me to give details first, or?
The university has Master Was, going all the way back to the beginning of what Master wanted to do. He had several huge projects that he had as his main focus. One was developing and supporting the Sangha. The second was developing a university, and the reason he wanted to develop a university was he saw that, number one, there's no way Buddhism would come into a new culture without engaging in the institutions of that culture. And the primary institution of cultural institution of Western culture is the university construct, where all knowledge, information, sort of secular, the secular world. He saw Buddhism in that sense as being secular and not religious. In other words, Buddhism could come into the West through what we would in the Western world consider the secular elements rather than necessarily religious elements, because it doesn't really fit what we call religion in the West. It much more fits what we call psychology, philosophy, cause and effect study, science, the study of cause and effect. And his belief was that Buddhism could hold its own in any academic setting as long as it was given an equal frame of reference. In other words, it could go up against science, philosophy, psychology. If you were studying the psychology of India in 300 in Nalanda, I can tell you right now, Western psychology would look pretty weak. But you can see that it would take a tremendous amount of work to bring the text of India and China into Western culture, into the language and so forth. We aren't even in kindergarten. We don't even have any slides up yet. Okay, we're not even in, we don't even have a swing set up yet. So we're in like the very, very, very earliest. People sitting in this room are analogous to when the first, a couple of monks came back and talked to a couple of people in China, and a couple of people were sitting around and, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. Let's think about doing that, okay? So just so we know, and then it took hundreds and hundreds of years. And Sherpa saw the institution of the Sangha, the institution of the university and education, were the primary, along with translation, which is really part of both of those. The translation is the third major aspect, is the translation, but the translation even has to be within an institutional construct. And so the relationship between translation and universities are very, very interconnected, interwoven. And then, of course, the interreligious dialogue, those are the four things in Sherpa's will that he stated very clearly was the things he wanted to really put some effort into. So we're right at the point now, watching this from a few of us in the room who sat with 7 or 8 people in the mission on 15th Street, and that was the whole DRBA, to where we are right now. There's a huge growth. From your standpoint, it might look like nothing's happening, but from the point of view of getting up high and looking at it, a huge amount is happening. And what it does is it opens up the space for a lot of things for a lot of people to do while they do their practice. What Sherpa had all of us do was be very busy so we didn't fall asleep, and also be useful at the same time. So his method was, find a whole bunch of stuff for everybody to do that's wholesome, and then it sets off in motion this huge thing that goes out into the world and does all this stuff with all this different, this up here, the farming up here. I could look at right now, I could count 100 things right now. Well, one of the major focuses of what Sherpa had was the university, and that it needed to be accredited, because going through accreditation is the actual process in reality of bringing something institutionally into the Western constructs. I mean, so going through all those hoops, the 47 categories that make an accredited university, is the transmission of something through the actual structure of the way that Western culture and constructs think and so forth. I don't know if everybody's following back, but so we're now at the point where the university is at the last stages of accreditation, and so we really, can use support in every kind of way in it. I think right now we've done a really pretty good job within the resources, using the resources we've had. We've had very good support from DRBA and everybody to support the university, and a lot of other people. We have a couple of classes, and we have a lot of students here. We have a really good faculty, and we have a really good set of students right now. And so we're now into the 3rd year of this new accredited program. And the reason for the design of the program is several things. One is probably the only program that could get accredited. And I won't explain to you why that. It would take me like an hour to explain to you why the particular dynamics of it is such that it would fit into a category of accreditation, but you'll be bored with that for sure. But in addition, it gives an opportunity. The primary purpose of the university is give people an opportunity to study Buddhism. We call it hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the study of the way we think, sort of the structure of the way we think. So the primary goal of the university is for the students to be able to go through a program where they study sutra texts, they study Western philosophical concepts, they study a whole cross-section of areas of study, so that not only can they read Buddhist texts, but they can translate those texts into Western terminologies and into Western culture and into the current world culture, And that takes having quite a bit of knowledge in a lot of different areas. So the university is, and people can speak to how far we've gone with it. I think it goes pretty well, at least in starting a program where you have a chance to study Buddhist texts directly, because the reason we created this particular accredited program was so that we could study. What happens right now is you could study Buddhism in the universities now. But if you go to study Buddhism in any university in America right now, it'll be through another methodology. In other words, it won't be Buddhism reading the text directly for your own understanding of it with its own context. It'll be through a comparative religion department where the categories of religion are applied, or a language program where categories of language are applied, or social sciences where categories of science. This program is designed the only place that you can go and read the text yourself directly and study the text within its own context, with it being directly related to your own understanding. And the class is a kind of discussion with a little bit of direction. Some are more than you can guess. I get more. I might talk more than other people, but
or faster than other
people. So I mean, we all have our different styles that we bring to it, but. So it's this opportunity, but second of all, and probably more importantly for the people in this room right now, it's an opportunity to be in the monastery, to live at the City of 10,000 Buddhas in a much more modern Western construct of communication and community that's supported by the overall monastic community, and is in the overall monastic community, yet it operates with it as a culture, as a different cultural construct. Now that's a work in progress. We do not have down all the different complexities of the interrelationship of a monastic community and an academic community. Nobody's saying we have that totally worked out. But what it does is give anyone in this room or anybody that you might know an opportunity to be at the city, participate through their own decision in as much of the Buddha Hall and as much of the city and as much of the monastic life as they wish or as they want. And at the same time, be doing an academic program that's moving towards accreditation. And so it's a real attempt to try to have a legitimate, real academic program, and at the same time do it within a monastic context that has a spiritual side that you can participate in to the degree you wish. And so far, I think we've been able to create most of that. So anyone here, anyone that you would know that thinks they might be interested, this would be a very good time, because I personally think this program, as it actually gets accredited, is going to be very popular and is very small. So when we have visas, that you can begin to imagine if we had visas for Asia right now, that we could take any student in the world right now to an accredited program inside the United States. You can begin to see, I think we may be taking only one student out of 100 or something that applies in a very short amount of time. However, right now, everyone has an in because we're still in the process of accreditation. So I have to say that this is an opportunity for people who wouldn't necessarily in 3 years or 5 years actually be able to enter the program. Especially we have people that their English language is not quite, like at 100%, and yet because of the circumstances, we work a lot with writing. We give a lot of backup with writing. So, because we know people are going to have a lot of troubles with writing probably if their English isn't super high. So therefore, there's a lot of backup right now for writing help, for English support. We even have an English support. My bet is that in 3 to 5 years, those things are going to fall away as the students that we're accepting are much more prepared, and we can accept it. So I think it's a unique opportunity for some of the people in this room and friends of people in this room that will actually not actually be available in a couple of years, because as the people begin to apply for it, they probably wouldn't get through the selection process that would now. And remember, the people that would join the university right now are part of the pioneering effort of creating. The students are as important as the faculty and the administration. There really isn't a separation between students and faculty and administration, really. We all kind of work together. So joining the university at this point, you're as important as a student as anyone else in the overall community. So I don't know if that's enough. Was that
That's wonderful.
A very large deer just leapt out of the underbrush.
And if you could get, I think that deer might be making an application. So if you could catch it before
It's
what?
Compassionate Animal Husbandry Program.
So Doug, can you talk about the timeline, like the deadline for applying?
The deadline is actually the interesting thing about how we do is we have a revolving admission program. And how that works is that we accept. People can submit at any time. Of course, the semester's coming very soon, so they need to submit pretty quick now. But you can submit at any time, and then we accept the people within a few weeks of the time that they've submitted that. And then if you don't get accepted, then we move on to the next group of people. So we take people in a revolving kind of context where you get to know right away whether you have or not got accepted, but it leaves open the option of accepting students over a long period of time rather than just at one time. Now this semester, we're only talking a few weeks until the semester starts. In fact, we have a Guanyin next, I'm going to leave here this afternoon to go back because the Guanyin starts this weekend. And so then that's all next week. And then we have only about 3 weeks until school starts. So the idea right now is just drop your life. Whoever, if there's people in this room, either of you know, drop your life entirely, whatever you were doing, that's okay. Tell everybody, your family that thought you were coming back, and the job you thought you had. Nah, it's okay, I just throw all my stuff in my car and I'm heading for DRV. But anyway, okay. It'll be a surprise.
That's it.
It'll be a surprise, but it'll be a surprise. It'll be a really big surprise. But anyway, go ahead.
It's hard to find much to say after that, but maybe I'll just add a couple of small things. A few days ago, I mentioned an interesting statistic that came up in a NACAC admissions conference, which is 25% of the new jobs that were created last year did not exist 4 years ago. So many people ask us, what is the value of a liberal arts education for people that are getting their bachelor's degree? Is it practical? And one of the other statistics that I learned at that conference was only 80% of students that graduate have careers in the major that they graduate with, and there is this huge demand in Silicon Valley and other places for students that graduate who can communicate extremely well. And I think that is something that we can offer with a DRBU education is incredible dialogue skills, because every week you're in class for 12 to 15 hours actively engaged in conversations with your professors and your fellow students around a text. You're constantly writing papers. You have the support of writing tutors if English is a second language to you, or if you just want a second opinion to kind of work through ideas. And these are incredibly valuable skills to have as you graduate with your bachelor's degree.
Mainly, though, the main thing you're going to gain is, since you're going to switch about 30 jobs or 20 jobs, you might as well have the mind ground slightly together so you're not totally confused as you're changing your relationships and your jobs and your house, and you're with different partners in your house every 5 months as they move out, and you could even learn to settle in your mind enough to survive like a week in the real world. That's the main goal, is to be able to find the mind ground to deal with the realities of what you're going to face. That's what the liberal arts education is about. DRBU, yeah.
And also, many people that are interested in the Masters of Arts and Buddhist Classics are also really interested either in going forward in their Buddhist cultivation, or also engaging with people who have similar ideas about the world. Actually, some have very different ideas about the world, but they want to talk about things that deeply matter: the nature of consciousness itself, how to think, how to affect change in the world. They want to go deeply into the text as a community, and we provide a very unique environment where people can study and practice together in a very focused place. There are not many places in the world you can go, especially on college campuses, where you look around and all of the food that you're offered is vegetarian and delicious and able to eat. And also, there's no distractions of like wild parties down the block. There's none of that. And the whole environment is very safe. So it's a very focused place where you can develop your practice and really study, make good, wholesome spiritual friends to help you in your study and your practice. And and our rolling admissions is continuing for this semester until the start. A thought I'd like to leave you with is maybe you're not in a place in your life where you would consider this for yourself, because maybe you can't drop everything in 4 weeks.
They all could.
You could if you chose.
There's no problem.
But maybe you have a sister or a good friend or somebody in your family who has always wanted to get their bachelor's degree but hasn't known the right time or the right place to go about that. Maybe you can refer them to us, and also for the master's program.
Okay, exercise. Check with Hank if anybody wants to drop everything. If somebody wants to drop anything, everything. This is the right time.
If anybody has not seen a deer, please stand up slowly.
You will not leave?